What does it take to get your wife to trust you? Today, I talked to a couple who left a successful business in a nice town to live in a train car in the middle of nowhere for 15 years. And when they started that journey, she didn't want to do it. But she eventually accepted the idea because she trusted God and trusted her husband. Guys, don't you want a wife who trusts you like that? In my conversation with Marcus and Telma, we walk and talk about what Marcus did to get Telma to trust him on this huge adventure. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Christian Marriage Podcast, the only podcast on the entire internet about Christian marriage that I host. I'm Nick. I'm a Christian marriage coach, and on this podcast, I talk with couples who have been recommended to me as having Christian marriages full of love and wisdom. We talk about how they made it through hard things in their marriage, and we tell these stories so that you can have great examples of how real couples have been able to build great marriages so that you can be encouraged and challenged to build a life-giving marriage for you and for your spouse. So let me introduce you to Marcus and Telma. They are from Brazil. They have been missionaries in Brazil for their entire married life, more than 27 years. Something interesting about them as a couple is that their first house that they bought was a train car, and they lived in it with their kids for 15 or 16 years. Marcus says his passion is fixing things, but the only thing that he can't fix is his wife. But it's okay because Jesus already did that. I love talking with Marcus and Telma. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And we talk about some really kind of spicy things. In typical fashion for these podcasts, all of the good stuff really is at the end. We have to kind of set up the problem and talk about their experience of the problem. And then what did it take to get through it always ends up being at the end. But if you stick around to the end, we will talk about submission, having joy, even whenever you don't have anything, and what it took for Marcus to be a person who Telma could trust with her life. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I really hope that it's going to be helpful for you. Let me get into a few principles that stick out to me. I want to talk about submission. I talk with a lot of couples as a marriage coach, and submission comes up a lot. How do you get your wife to trust you? Marcus's answer, which I thought was great, he said to the effect that if you want a submissive wife, make yourself submissive to your family's needs. This was a big theme that we talked about in the podcast and in the conversation, that Marcus was able to exude sensitivity to the needs of Telma and to the rest of his family so that they did not feel left behind for some other goal. For Marcus and Telma, their marriage and their family was the goal. And that's the kind of trust, and that's the kind of person that Telma in the end felt great about submitting to. We need to think for a minute about the gospel when it relates to submission. Now, God commands us to submit to him, but let's think about submission from God's perspective. God never forces us to submit to him. Now, I'm a Calvinist, and I believe in predestination and all that stuff, but God does not, and by the way, Calvinism does not teach that God takes away a person's ability to choose. In fact, even Calvinism says that God works within our human choices to bring about his good and perfect will. Now, this might sound pretty archaic, but this teaching has helped me become a better leader in my marriage and with my family. Because listen, if God does not use his infinite power and rightful authority to force us to make the choice that he, in all wisdom, knows is the right choice to make, then it doesn't matter what kind of power that I have, or what kind of authority that I have, or no matter how much I think I'm right, I can't force Sandy to make this decision or that decision. God doesn't force us to make those kind of decisions, so we don't have the right to force our spouse to submit to us in those ways. Secondly, even though God deserved our submission to him, just because he is our rightful authority, he also earned our submission by taking on our burdens on himself and meeting our needs at the cross. He died a death that we deserved to give us a life that we could never deserve. He used his position as our authority to die for us and lift us up, even though we already should have been submitting to him. I think often we think that our wives should submit to us simply because God told them to. And that is technically true, but what we have to understand is that God did not try to defend his position and authority, but he used his position and authority to pursue us, meet our need, and lift us up at the cost of himself. We need to wield our authority like that. Third and last thing about authority and submission. I have said this before, and I will say it again, that I have never seen a submission problem that wasn't first a headship problem. We as husbands need to assume that if our wives are not submitting to us, that there must be something that we can do better as a leader to make ourselves more loving, more trustworthy, and building safer contexts so that our wives feel good about choosing to submit to us. To assume that our wives' lack of submission is the problem pits us against them and also puts us into a passive, victim-based mentality which will not help us grow. I understand that there is a hypothetical situation that there is a submission problem without a headship problem. And in fact, God deals with that exact situation all the time. But that is almost certainly not the situation that you are in if you feel like your spouse is not submitting to you. So with all of that in mind, we need to think carefully about ourselves as gospel leaders in the image of Christ, trying to build up our wives. And you know what? In all honesty, a big part of how I have learned to serve my wife as the leader of our family is to communicate with her better. Now, if your communication in your marriage is not exuding the leadership of Christ, you might be making some simple mistakes. And those mistakes could be hurting the connection and the intimacy that you are able to build and the ways that you are able to serve your spouse. So if that feels like you and your communication is just not feeling great, then look at my guide, The 7 Deadly Sins of Marriage Communication. In there, I will help you identify some of the simple mistakes that you could be making and how to solve those mistakes so that you can begin kind of getting out of your own way so that you can serve your spouse in more meaningful, more tangible ways. I honestly think that learning to communicate with my spouse was and has been one of the biggest, most important ways that I have shown love to her. And these techniques that I cover in my guide were a big part of my role as a leader for our family. Use the link in the description to get your copy of The 7 Deadly Sins of Marriage Communication. I think you're going to find it really helpful. All right, let's dive in with Marcus and Telma. And I hope that you will be able to take this episode and build a life-giving marriage for you and for your spouse. Marcus and Telma, thank you so much for joining me on the Christian Marriage Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So we are going to talk about something very interesting. Your guys' story. You are missionaries. Now, you've been missionaries in where, like, what context have you been serving in, and for about how long?
Yeah. So Thelma and I, we were both born in Brazil and we were raised down there. Both of our families had involvement with missions in Brazil. Thelma's family with new tribes and with a lot of urban evangelism. And my parents specifically more with camp ministry. And so that's where we grew up in Brazil. That's where we were involved in missions for 25 years. About 20 years with camp ministry and 5 years with church planting.
Okay, yeah. Wow, that's great. Camp me and my wife met in a camp ministry actually. So I definitely we love camp ministry. I don't know what it's like in Brazil, but
Yeah, it's very Americanish, a lot of the activities that at the camp we were involved in.
yeah.
But yeah, camp's very popular in Brazil because of the financial situation of a lot of people where they can't afford to go out on their own. So they go as a group, and then it's a good way
Yeah.
for churches to gather youth. And we met at camp too. Yeah.
Oh, really? Did you? Okay. Let's see. There you go. That's perfect. Okay. So we were sort of talking about part of your guys' story, the story that you wanted to talk about is you wanted to talk a bit about your own journeys of following God into missions, because I think you said both of you were following God into missions individually. You sort of had this sense individually. But then you met each other, and now you have to kind of merge your vision and your calling and have to work out, hey, how can we be on mission together as as individuals, but as married couples? So to kind of to kick us off a little bit, give me a little bit of background about, you said you had this calling individually. to, pursue ministry, pursue mission. So for each of you, just quickly, what was that like for you, and whenever you got that sense of calling into missions?
Yeah, so for me, I was involved in camp ministry in Brazil, and I was a volunteer in during many years. And then I just felt that camp ministry, being involved with kids and teen and youth, it was my place. In the time I was also saleswoman, and I loved to be being a saleswoman. But at the same time, I love being in camp ministry and leading people to God, and showing people the way. And then I just felt that I will serve God through camp ministry. But I wasn't sure, because camp ministry was so specific in Brazil. And then I felt, wow, uh, if I marry someone that also has a calling for camp ministry, that would be perfect. But maybe I'll marry someone who will be a pastor, so I'll help him uh, in the church. Or maybe I thought, oh, maybe I will marry a businessman, and then I'll help him in his business.
Yeah.
Or if I marry a
Salesman.
popcorn salesman, I'll help him to put popcorn in the bag and help.
Yeah.
I knew I will help my husband in something, but I wasn't sure where. But I would love to. That would be camp ministry.
Yeah.
So
But
then
you had that kind of, you anticipated being a helper, I guess. Like you had this heart to be a helper.
Yeah, I know I'll be part of my husband's mission. So I had that mindset already. And then I met him in this camp that I was working and serving. And I think it was the third day when we really connect. And he put me in his canoe because he was in charge of the canoe trips. So he put me in his canoe, and then after paddling for 10 minutes, he proposed me in the third day if I would consider his marriage proposal. So I thought,
Wait, after 10 minutes of canoeing together?
yeah, like,
Well, we'd known each other for
3 days.
Yeah.
So then I thought, this guy is so crazy. He's totally out of his mind. And then I said, are you understand what you're saying if I want to marry you? Like, no, of course, no. Like, no chance. There's no way. So
I mean, that's canoeing for you. I feel like canoeing either like draws people together or like rips them apart. I feel like, right?
And he was smart, because he took me to the middle of the lake, so I didn't have any way out.
No escape route.
But we were there were more canoes too.
There are more canoes, but he put only me in his canoe.
Well, of course, I wasn't proposing to anyone else.
He's a thinker. He's a planner, man. He's got a plan.
Very good planner. Very good planner.
And that
That's
was
so
in
funny.
July of 1998.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. What about you, Marcus? Tell me about your, call to ministry, and what was that like for you?
Yeah. So I felt called to ministry when I was 15 on a missions trip with New Tribes Mission to build a house for a missionary in Northeast Brazil. And the funny thing is, we were building the house on the sand. So it's like the American missionary leader who was there, doing the trip. And he spoke English and I spoke English. So I was telling him, hey, Ben, I sang about not building our house on the sand my whole life. And here we are doing. He's like, just be quiet and start digging. But anyway, so that was where I felt God calling me, either to work with camp or in mission aviation as a mechanic. So one or the other. So then I came to the U.S., finished high school, went to technical college, did training in different camps, and returned to Brazil in December of 97 to help in the process of starting up of the camp where we met. So I got there in December. By March, I'd given up and said, God, I'm not going to find anyone here. But I'm content in being single, if that's what you have for me. And then she appeared in July, so I didn't take any chances.
Yeah.
And women are always complaining that men take forever. So see, you try to do it faster, still complaining. It's still a source of ridicule.
There's no winning. That's rule. I mean, rule number one of marriage is there's no winning.
Yeah.
um, that's amazing. Okay, so then yes, I'm going into fishing metaphors now. You meet the woman you like. You set the hook really quick. Trap her in her boat and talk about marriage. So okay, you're both on this journey of, you know what, I feel called to be in ministry. You've had a long history of being married and being in ministry. What decisions have you all, had to make that would help you take these individual callings and bring them together in a unity? What kind of decisions have you made that you feel like have been helpful through the years?
So for me, when we connect at camp, we decide to date, and we date for 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
So we met, got engaged, and got married in 7 months.
Wow.
So then the decision was, okay, am I going to move to where he's at, where the camp is? So when we were dating, we were talking about, okay, are you willing to come to this area? I was born in São Paulo area. So the place where the camp was in the center of Brazil. It's different. People
The
there, culture is very different, and it was very different from my culture.
Mm-hmm.
But then I knew, because of the purpose, of the camp, that would be a good. I didn't move like at once. So we did like back and forth. I was having my job, but at the same time, we were married, and then he was working with me, and then we were working in the camp. So we were doing both. So eventually, after 4 months that we were married, I just felt a sense. I was selling a product. I work with hair accessories, right?
Yeah.
And I felt when I left the place, the building, I just had this sense that this is not right anymore. I couldn't sell. I couldn't show the product with enthusiasm. And then I told him, like, I don't know what to do, because it seems the desire to sell got away from me,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, something's wrong. And now we have to pay all these bills for the wedding. And he told me, like, let's do a very simple wedding. So no, we're going to do a fancy wedding because I'm working, you're working. It's all good. But then I felt this lack of joy. And then I said, now I don't know what to do. I have to keep working and pressing and forcing, even though I don't feel like. And then he said, no, we can sell our car, buy a cheaper one, pay the bills, and live simple,
Mm-hmm.
So eventually God really blessed us, because the boss of the company gave us the rest. How did I say?
Yeah,
because the car belonged to the company, so I didn't have to pay the company anymore.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
So anyways, I was blessed. So I went to
They gave it as a going away present for
Yeah.
her
Oh,
from
wow,
her
wow,
job,
wow.
because she'd done so well in the year she worked.
So it was something
That's
that
amazing.
I did not expect, and then didn't. So then we went back and stayed, like, moving. We moved like 100% in that area. And then we had another big challenge, because he was a mechanic, diesel mechanic, or
Jet ski.
jet ski repair, all this.
Okay.
And then the reservoir where the camp is went very low, and then he lost most of his clients.
Because that's how we maintain. Like, I maintain myself financially as a tent maker. So I was back in Brazil as a missionary tent maker, but instead of making tents, I repaired jet skis on the side. So updated version of tent maker.
I don't know if the Apostle Paul was doing much of that, right?
Yeah, no, not at that.
So then I gave up of my job, and then he lost all his clients. And then we were like, okay, what we're going to do? We're following God. We're pursuing his calling. And then we are in this hard situation. And then it was tempted to go back, but I knew that wasn't what God had for me. Mm-hmm. And then we had the idea, someone gave us the idea to start a English school, like second language, because in Brazil, English is a second language. And then someone gave the idea for us to start an English school. So then we could maintain ourselves and serve at camp. Like, so we were being teachers for 3 days and serve the 4 days and the camp. So, but it was like a big commitment.
But that's a
like,
big,
okay,
I mean, that's a huge life transition.
we're risking.
Yeah.
So then my English wasn't good back then. So he was the principal of the school. He was in charge of everything. I was just the secretary, you know.
No, but she taught kids.
Yeah, I taught basic
No, but she
words.
knew a lot.
Yeah, but anyways, I knew that he was the guy who knew English. I was just a helper. So we did that for 3 years. And so we could serve at camp and at the same time and maintain ourselves financially. But there's one detail that when we were dating, we had a moment of crisis. And then he said, "Hey, Telma, God just told me that in 3 years, we're going to be full-time missionaries. It's not for now, but in the right time, we're going to be full-time missionaries."
Yeah.
So after we serve in the camp and and also maintain ourselves in the English school, he said, "Hey, Telma, remember the 3 years? Our 3 years as married is coming to an end. Now we're going to..."
Not as married.
Not as married. What did I say?
Our 3 years as married.
As
English teachers.
Yeah,
English teachers. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. So then now we're going to the next phase, which is raising our support to be full-time missionaries.
I gotcha.
And that was so hard for me because I said, we already have our students. We're already witnessing for these kids. It's been so good. We can do both. But Marcos said, "No, Telma, but if we raise our support, we can be full-time investing in people."
Yeah, wow. And that's hard because you were invested where you were, you're saying, and you felt like God was calling you somewhere else. Or actually specifically what you're saying is Marcus felt God calling you somewhere else. And Telma, you're saying, I don't necessarily, I'm invested here. And so that, creates, what was that? I don't know. What was that like, having that a little bit of that different desires, I guess?
It was hard for Telma because we were serving part-time as missionaries and then with the English school. But the English school was going very well. And it was even getting like more and more, developed and opportunities to open a similar school in a town close by. So then it's not like, oh, it was going bad. No, it was actually going very good.
Yeah, and even
third year.
Yeah, and even the kids were getting saved. Some parents became saved. Wow. Like today, we look back and we saw kids that today are adults and they're pastors, some pastors, strong Christians. So they were influenced by the time that we were in the English school. So I felt, wow, we already have a tool. Doesn't make sense to jump 100%.
You're like, look, God, like we're doing good things here. Like, isn't this good enough, God? Like we're having impact.
Yeah, and another thing too, I'm a person that I learned how to provide for myself. Like, okay, we can do it, and instead of like, okay, we're going to ask people to help us financially too, we can do both. And Marcos came from a missionary family who raised support. So he was a missionary kid. So in his mind, makes sense to raise money for you to be full-time a missionary. And for me, it was like, doesn't make sense. Like, we already have the money. But then I understood what he was saying. And finally I said, okay, God, we already have our money, but I have one request. It was kind of stupid what I prayed to God, but I was fearful that we are not going to be able to raise enough funds, right? So then I said, okay, God, we're making $2,000 here with the English school. Yeah. So I'll pray that you give me at least $100. So raising funds, at least $100 so I can buy rice, beans, and meat, and one Coca-Cola a week. I did like a very lower standard plan.
Helped God out.
And said, God, listen, I can do this, but at least give me $200. Let's put
Yeah.
in. So
Right.
then, of course, I didn't know who God was.
Mm.
I knew that God told him that we should move to this direction, but I didn't know like how you raise money, how you ask
Wow.
people to help you. I didn't understand. But I did this prayer. I said, okay, give me 200 and I give up of my 2,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And God was more generous than I imagined. He always gave, always supplied, provide for us. But it was hard.
Yeah.
It was very
I
scary.
love my favorite part of that is that one Coca-Cola a week made your budget. Like
Yeah.
And I said, and a hot dog too, one hot dog a week with the Coca-Cola. So
I didn't realize that like that's the American dream is also being lived out in Brazil. Like one hot dog, one Coca-Cola a week. That's
Yeah.
that's the good life.
Yeah.
If I don't have meat, it's okay. We can use just eggs. It's good. We can live simple.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay, but it's a huge transition, and it was. I think you're saying it was very hard. So how did you guys navigate that? There's probably maybe there's other stories that you could do, but listen, I want to slow down here a little bit because I think that has potential to create a lot of tension. That the husband feels called. It's sensitive too because this isn't just Marcus. You were not saying, no, I think we should do this. You were saying God told me that we should do this. And, you felt very called to it. So there's potential where Telma maybe would have like really taken exception to it. There's potential for a lot of tension there, right? How did you guys navigate that what was helpful for you to just navigate that tension, that potential tension? How did you form unity in that eventually?
I think if you take it back a little bit, into the calling, as you mentioned, but not just the calling, but the releasing control, especially over career and finances. Because I was in the U.S. at the time, I had two good jobs. One with it was a motorcycle mechanic job, and the other one at a goat farm. It doesn't sound great, but it was a very good job. And just doing at a goat cheese factory. Yeah. So it was an awesome job. And then I got invited to go back to be an assistant to my teacher at the technical school where I learned the jet ski stuff.
Yeah.
So everything was going good.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big thing to realize. God doesn't call losers in a sense, like he calls you when things are going good too. It's easy when things are going bad to feel, oh, God's calling. No, it's like when things are going good and it's like, hey, but I want you here. So for me to go back to Brazil, it was for me, I knew this and people told me this. It's like, man, you're going back to Brazil. That's like career suicide. It's like financially, it's not good career wise, but I felt conviction to go back and I knew the cost. And I knew that, but I'm given my youth and my ability to produce for myself, but I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, wow.
And so I went back to Brazil with that commitment. In the meantime, Telma, she was working as a saleswoman and stuff. And January and July were two vacation months that camps operate more in Brazil. And the camp she worked with, she'd go and volunteer there and the whole month. And those were the months when there was a lot of sales potential because it's vacation for schools and stuff.
Right.
So she was willing to give that up too in order to serve. So I think the commitment of putting God first and career and finances second as individual choices we had made prior to meeting with each other were fundamental in making living at camp, because after we'd been married for like 2 or 3 months, they needed someone to live at camp, and there wasn't electricity there or anything. So, but there was a good house. So we moved to camp. There was a little generator and it was very rustic. So for both of us, because we weren't raised in that area in central Brazil, and it was a challenge, but the foundation of the relationship, of the calling, of the letting go of, those are all good things. A career, a good salary, stability, those are all good things, but they're not life-saving things. They're good if they're good if they come as a blessing of choosing first to follow the Lord, but really choosing and really committing and really risking it. So I think that was what made changes possible as we went along, because we'd already made the decision years prior.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You're saying that you both had this conviction, and you had both made decisions that we're going to let God have control of our lives. And so then it loosened your grip. It made it, I think you said, it made it possible to follow God when we already knew that we weren't going to live a life where we're going to hold tight to money or things. And so even whenever it's hard to let go of something that seems secure, seems successful, seems like you're having good impact, you're already in a place to let it go if God calls. Yeah.
But it's always a temptation to pick it up.
Mm.
And the other thing is, it's not like you don't reach different levels of Scientology or whatever, where no, it's always growth. God's always promoting growth.
Yeah.
And so once he teaches you something and he lets you get to know who he is from that angle or that perspective, he says, okay, now you're going to learn more about me in this area.
Yeah.
And so it's changing constantly. And that goes, you're concerned for the supply for yourself, and then when you get married, for your spouse, and then later on for your children.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize you're never going to be enough of a source for everything that your kids, your daughter in law or your grandkids, like you're limited. So you have to start leaning more on God. And God puts you through situations like that, not just individually, but in your marriage. And I think an important thing, Nick, to look at is marriage is ministry, because we think of going to church as worshiping God. Worshiping God is living out the gospel.
Yeah.
And for a man, he lives out the gospel, taking care of his wife first, above ministry, because a lot of times that gets placed second place. And then you have the fallout of so much damage within ministry, within the holy of holies of Christian living. The examples end up getting busted up and in shambles, because I think God always wants to take us back to basics. Like, if you take care of your wife, then you understood the gospel. If you stop to really take care of your kids, in the sense, not just, oh, they got, their college is paid or this is paid, they got it. No, it's like spend time with them, and live out the gospel so that they know what it is in every different area of your life. And we won't be able to do it all. We mess up in some.
Sure.
But that's part of it too, is showing that you're not perfect and just admitting it when you realize it. But it's a rocky road.
It's a rocky road. And no, but I so appreciate that. You're talking about a sort of order of priority that has, I'm assuming you're saying, has kind of allowed you guys to navigate whatever tensions you may have felt. That you're saying, Marcus, that that God has called you to missions, but you're saying God has called me to minister chiefly to Telma and to my family. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm not, he's not gonna, how would you say, he's not gonna call me beyond that, or he's not, I'm called first to my wife and my family, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I think in marriage, you're called as a husband to take care of your wife. And that's the primary structure of a family, of the couple. And if the couple is good, the family does good. It doesn't mean it's perfect, and it doesn't mean there aren't issues. There will be, but there's more strength in addressing those issues.
Yeah.
And it's like you were mentioning, seek ye first the kingdom of God. That's like, if you have that center, other things will come along. But it doesn't mean things are all going to work out.
Yeah.
But it does mean that God will be helping you, because you're putting first things first.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so common it's easy as Christians, we tend to say, well, people are just chasing money and that's why marriages aren't working. But in the Christian community, marriages and family and leadership and missionary lives and pastors and all of that, and youth pastors, because they're always a mess anyway. But anyway, the thing is, ministry can be put before what God really wants, before you actually really seeking Him first. And it can be as much as an idol and as much as a stumbling stone as other things, as, addictions, as the things that are not permittable, but it can be a bad thing too. And you see that a lot in missionary families, especially with the kids, and just the kids not being functional, or the kids hating God, or, because something went wrong, because God, He's not that picture that maybe the parents painted. The mission pressured the parents to be under, and all of that.
Right.
So, but each case is different. But I think the foundation, the firm foundation of commitment, but not just I'm committed. It's like, no, I'm really committed. I'm willing to go through with this.
Yeah.
And to look back years from now, and not regret the decision.
For sure. No, that is good. Here's kind of a question for you, Telma. So it's a good game here that Marcus is talking. It's a really good foundation, but it's hard going through something like a big transition and everything, to trust that He is having you and the family as His priority in ministry. Did you ever struggle, Telma, to trust that Marcus was considering what was best for you and for the family as your family was following God's call?
Marcos was always, he's not perfect, of course, but he's very reasonable, was always very reasonable. And he tried to see everybody's side,
Yeah.
and me. And so it wasn't hard for me to believe and trust in him, because he tried to listen, and Marcos is very sensitive to see the needs. I know lots of husbands that they really don't notice how tired the wives are. Marcos was always very, very sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always felt that he was taking care of me,
Yeah, that's great, because I think you're right. I think it's easy, like you said, Marcus, for a husband to get really into the calling and not be as sensitive to what's going on in the family. So real quick, what was anything helpful in making sure that you were sensitive to the needs of your family, even as you're you're following this high calling from God? Was anything helpful in continuing to be sensitive to the needs of your family through all these transitions?
For me or for her?
For either of you.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that really, really helped a lot was that Marcos, he tried really hard to see the ministry, but he could see that together we could go further. He could do things faster on his own, but he knew the power of being together. So I don't know if I really answer your question, but he knew that together we could accomplish more, and this made everything easier,
Yeah, I think what I look back today and tell Telma this is the impact of, like she said, of not just rushing ahead, but making sure everyone is following along. And instead of, I got to the promised land, but then a million stayed behind. Moses could have made it fast. Well, he never made it, but anyways, but I think just understanding that family is important. And I didn't really understand it that much back then. I mean, I focused on, God gave us kids. Now I have to do my best and make sure I provide, not just financially, but as a father being present, because they're going to grow so fast, because that's what all the older people said. Oh, they'll grow so fast. And they did. But I think just it was well worth it to go slower, and many times to not have the successful ministry results that were expected on the outside, but to have deep, meaningful, lasting results that weren't sometimes as valued, but that were bigger than any ministry could do. And I think, like Thomas said, I look back and see, that's what we did. We came together. And when we were church planning, that was one interesting thing, because we did it as a family, going to the rural communities, because in Brazil, the kids study half of the day. And so when most of the time, like the two youngest would go with us, but then the older ones, they might go or not, depending on school. But we had a person tell us one time when we were visiting this little rural community, and it was like a couple, 10, 12, 15 miles dirt road. So it was hard to get to. And we went to visit this lady in her house, and she was like, wow, what really amazes me is that you guys, you're not from this area. You weren't raised here. You don't have relatives here. And yet you come to visit me at my house, and you bring your kids. And she was amazed because her daughter, who lived in southern Brazil, when she came to visit her mom, she wouldn't take her daughter or the granddaughter to visit the grandmother in the rural area because it was dangerous, because scorpions. And I mean, it's dangerous, but it's not.
Dirt road.
Or dirt road, But then the impact of a family doing it. But then not just the family doing it where the guy's just, this very authoritative, that stereotype, but where it's like they're actually helping each other and the kids are part of it. And not that everything's going good, because our kids did act up and do stuff. And then, but because they had bad examples at home. But just the power of a couple and the power of a family in all the imperfections, but striving,
and not being scared of those imperfections. Or,
accepting them and accepting the handicaps that family life brings, which aren't handicaps. They're just life. That is life. That's how things go. And you can achieve, a lot of people achieve things on their own, but then they're all by themselves, versus achieve less, but together, and have a broader impact, and an impact that goes beyond your lifespan.
Yes, that's good. It's more important to do something that to bring everyone along, as you said. I mean, Telma, you said that Marcus really embodied that, and you really felt that value from him of, we're going to be doing this together, so I'm going to be sensitive to everyone along the way.
Yeah, and he provide the conditions for everybody to go. It's not like, okay, you guys can come after me anytime you want. No, we're going to do this. We're going to go this way. And sometimes he didn't have all the solutions. Like, we have to do this. How can we do this? How can, And one thing that I want to say for those who are listening, sometimes they see us and they say, oh, this person was very well prepared by God to submit and to, and as a woman, it was hard for me because I lost my mom when I was 12 years old. And then I had to be independent very young in my life. And so it wasn't easy for me to have this submission. But I know that the world, when they hear the word submission, they say like, oh, it's someone who is being a macho man, a guy who will be mean to the wife. But I one thing that I learned in my own marriage is that we can learn to submit if the husband, right, loves us. So there's a book called Love and Respect that I really think it's very neat. Because talk about the love, if the husband loves, the wife will be more prompt to submit.
Yeah.
And because someone has to be the leader, someone has to be.
Yeah, sure.
You
right.
know? And so, and guys, usually the guy is easy to make the quick decision. Women, we think like 1,000 options, and guys, they can have this like 2. Can we do this or this? They are very, so I admire his leadership because he can see like this and this, and it's not imposing. It's just like he already filtered, he could see. And sometimes, of course, he made some mistakes, and sometimes he judged in one way or the other one. And I don't agree. We're not going to do this, blah, 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 But when you're following God, he's going to make things work, Sometimes he had to come back and okay, we're not going to do this way after considering what you're saying,
Like sawing the dog in half because both kids were fighting over it.
Yeah, that seems like a bad decision.
But I think what she said about being submissive, it's the husband being submissive to the wife's needs and the family's need over what he wants and what he thinks. Because we're so, and I'm not talking about the heathen. I'm talking about within the Christian community and within ministry. It all sounds great, but there's so much pressure that it's not God putting. And then whenever that pressure is going over needs that your family has, it doesn't mean that, okay, they're going to have to, this time it's going to have to be over their need. There are times where that does happen. But for the most, there's a lot of stuff that isn't really a ministry need, where your family is being submissive to as a man. My wife needs this. She needs help with this. Or my kids, they need my time. And God will continue to be God and take care of everything. But I think it's us toning down and not just being, okay, I did my part, I'm at home, your turn to do everything. But seeing it's a continuous, it's ongoing.
Yes. And that it strikes me that as the leader of your family, the necessity to be sensitive to the members of the family is like just a vital part of being that gospel leader. It would be possible to be some other kind of leader, this authoritarian, type of leader, and not be sensitive to it. But to be a gospel leader, you think like the sheep, the lost, the one sheep that was lost, like that's the kind of leadership that Christ shows, that okay, somebody is in need and I need to be responsive to the needs of the people that I'm leading. I've said before that submission is like a sensitive topic. Said before that I've never, and I've worked with a lot of couples over the years. I have never seen a submission problem that wasn't a leadership problem. We as, I don't know, husbands need to really consider that it's our calling to lead in Christ, and Christ is full of power, yes, but he uses that power to lift up and to be sensitive to our needs and to die to himself and all that kind of stuff, right? I think that's really helpful. I know you guys are passionate. I want to give you a chance to just kind of talk. Consider this like just a kind of a random transition. You guys have had a big, full life of ministry and being married. So what do you think is maybe your top 1 or 2 most important things to pursuing a rich marriage and having a rich ministry together? What is the 1 or 2 most important things to that?
Yeah, I would like to say that I think at least for me, what helped a lot, our marriage. It's something that I learned with my dad. And my dad was a person that did not love money, you know. He had stuff, but he was always very generous, helping people. And he taught me a verse that says that a great gain,
Great source of gain.
is to have
Contentment with joy, I think.
is to have joy, I think, with contentment.
Yeah, joy with contentment.
So to have something in your life, but then you can say that's enough, you know. And it's a great gain. It's a great. I think in Portugal it says it's a fountain of gain. Is if you have joy with contentment, and this for me helped me a lot to be happy with less, you know, because every woman, we like big stuff, high, you know, it's just normal for everybody. But with the gospel, you can learn to have less and be happy, you know?
You can learn how to have joy.
Yeah, to have. And I think if a wife, a woman, if you have that kind of heart, you put less pressure in the husband. Oh, you have to work harder. You have to buy me a new car. You have to buy me a new apartment. You have to do this. You have to do that. You know? And if you value more the person than the money, then you really don't need to have a house. You can rent a house. You can rent a small place. You can live simple, but you have each other. You have time for each other. And what I see a lot is that both couples, they are working too much. They're doing too much, but they don't spend time together because they don't have time. And then it's all about conquering. But what is conquering? What is achieving? And then we are in a situation here, living in this place in Florida, and we see a lot of older people, like retired people, and they have these giant houses. And then we talk like they work so hard to have this big house for just two people, sometimes just only one person. And we chose different. We chose to live simple, to have less. But we had each other, and we have good memories of many, many years with our kids. We saw them growing. And now if we want to have possessions, we still are young. We can have. But our future plan is, okay, we can buy a trailer and live in a trailer, you know. We don't have big.
I think, the important thing is that the couple, I think God brings people together that are going to match up in what God is teaching and what God is calling them for. So you don't, like, all couples don't have to buy a trailer and just travel around like gypsies. But he will call people because that's what he created them for, in the good sense. And I think that for a marriage to succeed, the foundation has to be Christ, but not religion, not denominational, institutional church Christ, but actual Jesus and what he taught versus what is lived out in the structure of the companies that are to really live out outside of the church walls and in your house, and to understand what the pearl of great worth is and what real success is. And I talk about success not, oh, he's a big business, but in ministry. Because because us being a couple that's involved in missions, what is success as a missionary? The Bible talks about what good is it for a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul, to lose his household, to lose his marriage. Where's the gospel there? It happens. And I'm not saying it's a recipe for, like, everything that we look back at, we're looking back at. But when we were going through that, we were looking at Christ in the sense of what would God have us do individually, and that links as a couple, which flows down as a family. Because, and Telma reminds me of this, especially if the kids were younger, and she'd say no to something and I'd say yes. And then she'd say, remember, in heaven, we won't walk in with holding hands. Each one goes in individually.
Yeah.
Or it just goes one person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
right.
and it's true. It's an individual decision to maintain a bond and a relationship, a covenant of a marriage.
Yeah.
And it's individually, and then it goes to the couple, and then it goes to the family.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've been involved with ministries that work with young kids that have behavior problems.
Yeah.
And they weren't born that way. It came from the family. And then they want you to fix the kid without fixing the you know. So,
Yeah.
so it's difficult. But I think as a couple, but as individuals, seek first the kingdom of God and everything that he has put into your heart when he created you as individual and as special as you are, where one day he'll give you a white rock with your name on it that only you and him know, in the book of Revelation talks about. He put things in your heart, and he's going to establish those according to seeking first the kingdom. Doesn't mean it's going to be success in ministry perspective and financial perspective, but it's success in his perspective.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah. So helpful to, obviously easier said than done. And there's a lot of little details of how to work that out of seeking first the kingdom of God and everything. But just to have that as a foundation of, I'm not my own person. I am living for Christ, and I have to be like Christ, I think is what you're saying. And vital to any sort of success or joy. Can we just define, what if we define success as joyful contentment, something like that, right? No, it's really helpful. Well, Marcus and Telma, thank you so much for being here. And I think that this has been, I think it's been really helpful. Really good perspective of how do you become a couple instead of two individuals sort of doing their own thing. And I just think it's helpful. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, Nick. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Marcus and Telma. If you found this helpful or encouraging in any way, would you please leave me a 5-star review on the platform that you're listening to this on? It would really be helpful to me. Also, leave me a comment and let me know, what is the most important part of you and your spouse figuring out this whole submission thing? What are the problems that you've had to deal with? And what have you done that has been helpful in navigating this headship and submission question? Let me know in the comments, and let's build each other up with our shared wisdom so that we all can build a marriage that gives us life. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.